Hey y'all, I'm Sam, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about Splattershot builds. A little bit about me. Depending on how you look at it, I'm either a Splattershot 1 trick, 2 trick, or 5 trick, with 25 stars and about 4,500 wins spread across the variants. My peak X power is 2700. I play the weapon for my mid-level team Coral Convergence, and I have a handful of set wins over higher level players. I'm sure more qualified people to talk about builds are out there, but none of them seem to be making videos, so you'll have to settle for me. Splattershot is arguably the most flexible weapon in the game, and that's reflected in its builds. There are tons of different choices in what you run, but let's start with the basics, the stuff I run in 99% of my builds. Stealth Jump, Quick Super Jump, Ink Resistance, Special Saver, and Intensify Action. Stealth Jump is Stealth Jump. Between bombs, chargers, midlines, Zuka, hammer strikes, and whatever else the opponents have in their kitchen sink, the only thing stopping your jump from getting killed a majority of the time is that it's concealed. There are some very niche situations where you might consider running Object Shredder instead, but I'll talk about that closer to the end of the video. 99.9% of the time, run Stealth Jump. Next up, a single sub of Quick Super Jump. This brings the time it takes to super jump from 80 frames down to 58, just over a third of a second. Often you'll find yourself in a difficult situation where the only way to live is to jump out, and the difference between 80 frames and 58 frames is noticeable. For only one sub, this has one of the highest return on investments out of any gear ability in the game. Another high return on investment sub is Ink Resistance. A single sub of Ink Resistance increases your movement speed in enemy ink and gives you a 10 frame buffer for taking damage from enemy ink. The run speed buff is less meaningful for shot than it is for many other weapons, since shot can quite easily paint its feet, but it's still quite helpful for not getting tripped up. The 10 frame buffer means you won't be taking damage anytime you touch even just a pixel of the opponent's color. In a perfect world, you're only ever in your own ink, but Splatoon is fast, Splatoon is messy, and ink resistance helps make up for that. Next on the list is Special Saver. When you die without any Special Saver, you lose 50% of your charged special. With a single sub of Special Saver, you lose only 41%. That 9% might not seem like a lot, and well, it isn't, but you generally want your special the most right after you've died, and just a single sub helps with that a lot. Lastly, we have 2 subs of Intensify Action. This brings the shot's jumping accuracy from a spread of 11.66 degrees to a spread of 8.26 degrees. When grounded, the shot's accuracy is 4.86 degrees, so some quick math says that with no IA, jumping increases your shot spread by about 140%, but with 2 subs, only about 70%. Most of the time, it's best to keep your feet grounded, but sometimes you need to swim off a ledge, jump to keep mobility over enemy ink while firing, jump to increase your range in a fight, or jump to reach that charger. 2 subs of IA help stop the air from crippling your aim. Okay, so like I said, this is what I run in every single one of my shot builds. From here, we have to start making choices. At this point, it's important to consider your comp, your opponent's comp, the mode you're playing, and the map you're playing it on. One of the first questions to ask is last ditch effort or comeback, and we'll start by talking about LDE. LDE begins activating when the opponents have pushed to 50 points, and ramps up in intensity as they continue to score until it reaches full power at 30 points. LDE will also activate in its full when there are 30 seconds or less remaining in the match. When maxed out, LDE gives you 18 ability points of Inksaver Main, Inksaver Sub, and Ink Recovery Up, which substantially increases shots uptime. 108 shots to 140 shots is about a 30% increase, equating to 3.2 full seconds of additional continuous fire. On top of that, the time it takes to refill your ink tank is decreased by over half a second. LDE is useful in zones if you're one of the sole sources of paint for your team. If I was running shot with a double midline comp, something like pen bucket squeezer shot or pen S-blast sword shot on a splat zones map, I would run LDE. In environments like those, I often find myself needing to paint constantly, and I'm often running out of ink. The ink efficiency given by LDE is massively beneficial. LDE can get value outside of zones, but usually other game modes tend to be more fight heavy, which means you'll find yourself paintbotting less and dying more. In situations like those, or in comps with additional sources of paint, comeback is king. And I mean king. Comeback is God's gift to Cephalopod, giving you 10 ability points of Inksaver Main, Inksaver Sub, Ink Recovery Up, Run Speed Up, Swim Speed Up, and Special Charge Up for 20 seconds every time you get splatted. That is a 16% increase in continuous fire duration, an 11% faster ink tank refill, an 8% swim speed buff, and a special that charges 9% faster. In a fast-paced meta where fights are frequent and respawns are quick thanks to everybody's favorite tacticooler, comeback is incredible. Outside of those specific situations where I'm running LDE, I am running comeback. Alright, next let's talk swim speed. Swim speed is a pretty important stat. The faster you swim, the faster you rotate to where you need to be, the faster you can punish overextended enemies, the harder you are to hit in fights, the faster you can push the Rainmaker. I like running a main of swim speed, and then a few extra subs if I have room at the end. Alright, special charge up. While Shot is a weapon with solid fighting power, it also has some of the best paint in the game and two of the best specials in the game. As lame as it is, Shot gets a lot of value by playing for its special. On my main build, I run 2 subs of Special Charge Up, which brings me from 210p to 199p for Splattershot, and from 190p to 180p for T-Tech. That's only about a 5% decrease in the amount of paint you need for Special, but I find it to be pretty noticeable. On certain maps, like Crab Lake or Hagglefish, I find myself not needing to move around very often. I also find myself unable to move forward and fight, particularly if the enemy has midlines. When this is the case, I run a main and a sub of Special Charge Up, alongside LDE if it zones and come back otherwise. In some truly egregious matchups, like if I'm fighting against double midline on Crab Lake Clams and I have 2 other teammates to play aggro, I'll run 2 mains of Special Charge Up, giving me an 18% faster special. But again, that's only for very specific situations where I feel like the only thing I can do is spam specials all game and it's not splat zones. I like to make up for the lost main of swim speed with somewhere between 2 and 3 subs, because even when you're playing passive, having a little bit of movement speed to escape bad situations against weapons looking to kill you, or just generally rotating to where your team needs you, is really nice. Okay, what next? If you're fighting certain weapons like a Stamper, a Bucket, or a Blaster, especially a ranged Blaster, running a sub of Bomb Defense is super important. This will make it so that the outer hitbox of lethal bombs does 28.5 damage instead of 30, meaning it won't combo with the 70 that those weapons deal. Splatana, RV, and Bucket all have somewhat long times in between their attacks, so the difference between getting one shot by them and two shot is a pretty big deal. From here, there are tons of different things you could run. I've been experimenting with a third sub of Intensify Action, and I really enjoy the additional accuracy it gives me. You could also run a second sub of QSJ if you find yourself needing to jump out constantly. That brings you from 58 frames down to 50, so exactly half a second faster than jumping out normally. You could also run a second sub of ink resistance if you find yourself often getting caught in enemy ink. You could run more special charge up if you find yourself wanting to play your special more, or you could not run any special charge up and run more utility subs. The thing I recommend the most, though, if you don't have a clear idea of what you want to run, is to just stack on more swim speed. Special charge up is nice for when you're building your special. QSJ is nice when you need to jump out. Ink resistance is nice when you're moving through areas enemies are contesting, but swim speed is nice always. You'll almost always benefit from simply moving faster. The main thing, though, is experiment. Play around with your gear and see what fits you best. Shot is extremely flexible in what it runs, and a lot of it comes down to personal preference. Okay, so those are the more mainstream shot builds. Utility sub, swim speed, special charge up. But shot has a few other things it can run. The first I'll talk about is quick respawn. QR activates when you die if you haven't killed an enemy since the last time you died. Assists don't count for this. When you die with a main and 2 subs of QR, which is the generally accepted minimum amount to run and the maximum amount I recommend you run, then you will respawn in 5.667 seconds rather than the base 7.5. That's 32% faster. If you're going to be super aggressive with shot, which you should be if you're running QR, then swim speed goes a pretty long way, which is why I recommend you don't run more QR. QR is worth running if you're playing a very aggressive role on your team. The act of running in and dying can get a lot of value, even if you don't get a kill. Well-timed and well-placed feeding drags attention away from key areas, allowing your teammates to take space and hopefully trade off of you. QR makes those deaths even more worth it. You don't see QR shot very often, since there are better weapons to play super aggro with, like Viper, Dualies, Decav. And on top of that, most of the weapons of the current meta, Shot has bad matchups into, like Buckets, Scowls, Pens, Headits, etc. So QR Shot is pretty far from being meta, in my opinion. But if that's the playstyle you enjoy, or the playstyle that fits your comp the best, this is definitely a viable build. The reason Shot has a bad matchup into those weapons is largely because they outrange it and can easily stuff its approach options. This fairly niche build makes up for that. Ninja Squid. Ninja Squid makes you swim 10% slower, but in return eliminates the swim ripples after half a second of swimming. Full disclosure, I have very little experience using Ninja Squid. It was meta at the beginning of Splatoon 3 because E-leaders were running the game and Cooler wasn't meta, and I used it then, but nowadays it really doesn't fit my playstyle, and I hate feeling slowed down. To counteract that flow, I'd recommend running somewhere between 2 and 3 subs of swim speed. You'll still be slower than when you started without Ninja Squid, but it seriously helps make up for that slow. And after comeback, you'll be a little bit faster. Speaking of comeback, I would recommend running comeback alongside Ninja because the main reason you run Ninja is to fight more. And if you're running LBE, your game plan is to paint a lot. If you're painting, you aren't fighting, and the enemies will know where you are anyway. So Ninja doesn't give a lot of value for that playstyle. Again, Ninja Squid is fairly off meta, and I don't have much experience with it, but I think the times it's best to run it are when your team needs you to be fighting more than painting, and the weapons you need to fight all zone you out pretty well. One last thing worth noting about Ninja Squid, even if you aren't fighting weapons that combo off a bomb chip, sub resistance can be worth running because it reduces the amount of time you get tracked by location subs, which obviously are a counter to the stealth of Ninja Squid. Okay, as promised, let's talk about Object Shredder, something you occasionally see on Shot at extremely high levels of play. The conditions where you would use Object Shredder are very specific. First, you aren't jumping in very often. This is most often the case if you're playing extremely passive, usually on Splat Zone, and or the map just generally doesn't favor safe jumps like Crab Lake or Mako Mart. Second, you're running V-Shot, and third, the enemy has a crab or a Booyah Bomb. In my experience, strikes do a perfectly good job shredding bubbles, crabs, and booyahs, but Zuka needs a little bit of help against those latter two. Booyah Bomb has 470 HP worth of armor, and Trizuka will do 440 damage to it. If a teammate is also shooting at the Booyah user, a single shot from Zuka will be enough to take it down, but otherwise it'll take all three.
No.
With Object Shredder, however, Trizuka will do 484 damage, instantly breaking the Booyah armor and letting you kill with the second shot. Time is a resource, and so is ammunition. Only needing to spend 2 of your Zuka shots to kill a Booyah user is a pretty big difference. The main thing people run Object Shredder for, though, is Crab. Crab has 500 HP, and without Object Shredder, a direct hit from Zuko will do 396 damage. 2 direct hits from Zuka, or a direct and an indirect, will break the Crab and, most of the time, kill its user. You can also throw a Suction Bomb, doing 180 damage to the Crab, and then hit with a Zuka direct to kill the Crab and the user. With how much Crab can strafe, though, hitting those directs is weirdly hard, and half the time I go for it, the Crab just kills me. With Object Shredder, Azuka Direct deals 514 damage, instantly killing the Crab and inconsistently the user as well. Giving the Crab as little time as possible to hit you with its one shot is pretty nice, and this also means if you miss a few shots or spend the shots on other targets, you're still able to break it. The downside of all of this, though, is that you aren't running Stealth Jump, which means most of the time you aren't allowed to jump in. If you aren't extremely sure of what you're doing, I would just run Stealth Jump, even on maps like Crab Lake or Mako. That's the end of the video. I hope you learned something. I put a decent amount of work into this, so a little thumbs up down below would mean a lot. And if there are any other guides you'd like me to make, please let me know in the comments. Have a wonderful day.